So, you want to own a train station, not a train, not a railway. The building itself, the platforms, the shops, the parking, the 10,000 people who walk through it every single day without buying a single ticket from you. Here's the part that breaks brains. The busiest train stations on Earth make more money from a $14 sandwich than from the trains that stop there at all. Here's the paradox nobody explains. A train station can run at a loss on its actual railway operations. The tracks, the signals, the trains themselves. And still be one of the most profitable pieces of real estate on the planet. The trains are basically a loss leader. They exist to guarantee foot traffic. The real business isn't moving people. It's renting the ground those people stand on for the 4 minutes before their train arrives. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it costs to buy or lease a train station, from a sleepy regional stop to a global mega terminal. You'll know the hidden costs that never show up in the listing, the ones tied to government contracts, historic preservation laws, and security mandates. You'll understand the actual mechanism that turns a building full of strangers into a 9-figure cash machine. And you'll see exactly why some of the world's grandest stations have gone spectacularly, catastrophically broke trying to do it. Let's talk tiers, because buying a train station means wildly different things depending on scale. Tier 1. The small regional station. Think a converted Victorian-era stop in a town of 40,000 people. These change hands, usually through municipal auction or rail authority disposal programs, for somewhere between $180,000 and $650,000. You're buying a building, maybe 2 platforms, and a parking lot. Passenger volume, maybe 900 people a day. Revenue potential is thin, but so is the price tag. Tier 2, the mid-size commuter hub. These serve 15,000 to 40,000 daily passengers, usually in a metro suburb feeding a bigger city. Acquisition or long-term concession rights here run from $8 million to $35 million, depending on retail square footage, and whether you're buying the freehold or just a 30 to 99-year operating lease, which, in this industry, is far more common than outright ownership. Tier 3, the major urban terminal. Picture something like a 200,000 square foot building serving 120,000 to 250,000 passengers a day, with retail concourses, a hotel wing, and direct subway integration. Concession rights, or redevelopment deals at this level, run $400 million to $1.2 billion, typically structured as 20 to 40-year public-private partnerships, rather than a clean sale. And then there's the tier that isn't really for sale at all. The true mega terminals. Grand Central Terminal scale properties, or Shinjuku Station in Tokyo, the single busiest train station on Earth, moving over 3.5 million passengers a day through more than 200 exits. These aren't bought. They're inherited by governments, transit, authorities, or sovereign-backed conglomerates, and the retail licensing revenue alone from a station like that can exceed $500 million a year. You will never own one. But you can lease a 400 square foot kiosk inside one for roughly $28,000 a month, and that kiosk will out-earn most entire regional stations combined. But the price tag is just the start. Here's what nobody warns you about. First, heritage and preservation law. A huge percentage of profitable stations are protected historic structures, which means you can't touch the facade, the roof trusses, or sometimes even the interior signage without government-approved restoration specialists, at costs running 3 to 5 times normal construction rates. One repainting and restoration project on a single 1920s-era station canopy quoted at $2.3 million versus roughly $410,000 for an equivalent non-historic structure. Second, security and liability mandates. Any station handling more than roughly 10,000 daily passengers is typically required to run 24/7 CCTV coverage, blast-resistant trash receptacles, K9 units on rotating schedules, and coordinated response protocols with National Rail Police. Annual security compliance costs for a mid-size hub commonly land between $1.4 million and $3.8 million before you've sold a single ticket or rented a single retail unit. Third, and most brutal, you rarely control the trains. In most countries, the railway operator and the station operator are separate entities. You might own the building and the retail rights, while a state rail authority controls scheduling, platform access, and, critically, how many trains actually stop there. Lose a route, lose your foot traffic, lose your business, and you had zero vote in that decision. So here's the whole train station business in one sentence. You're not selling transportation. You're selling captive attention, by the square foot, at a markup that would be illegal anywhere else. Let's start small. Imagine a single coffee cart on a platform. Rent to the transit authority, $1,200 a month. That cart sells 340 coffees a day at $4.50 each, at a margin of about 68%. That's roughly $1,040 a day in gross profit, over $31,000 a month, against $1,200 in rent. That's not a coffee business. That's a money printing license disguised as a coffee business, and the only reason it works is that every one of those 340 customers is trapped there for 6 to 9 minutes with absolutely nothing else to do. Now scale that logic to an entire terminal. A major station doesn't lease space by the acre the way a mall does. It leases by footfall exposure, meaning rent is priced against passenger volume, not neighborhood comparables. A retail unit that would cost $9,000 a month in a regular high street can command $34,000 a month inside a terminal, moving 150,000 daily passengers. Because the landlord, meaning you, isn't selling square footage. You're selling a guaranteed government-subsidized crowd that has no choice but to walk past that storefront. Then there's the second engine, non-retail ancillary revenue. Advertising space inside a major terminal, the digital boards, the escalator ramps, the tunnel-length cinema walk at corridors, routinely sells for $18 to $45 per 1,000 impressions. And a top-tier station can log over 40 million monthly passenger impressions. Do that math and a single advertising contract on one concourse can clear $2.1 million a year. And that's before parking fees, luggage storage, ATM commissions, and station-branded merchandise are even counted. And here's where it gets interesting. The trains themselves are almost incidental to your profit and loss statement. Rail authorities frequently pay you, the station operator, a per-passenger access fee just for the privilege of stopping there, something in the range of $0.40 to $1.10 per boarding passenger. On 150,000 daily passengers, that's an additional $60,000 to $165,000 a day in fees you collect simply for existing as the building the train has to touch. Here's the insider access nobody gets to see. Major terminals are engineered, architecturally and psychologically, to maximize dwell time without feeling like a trap, because a rushed passenger buys nothing, but a mildly delayed one buys everything. Look at the geometry. Concourses are deliberately built with long, gentle sightlines toward platforms rather than direct routes, forcing passengers to walk past 30 to 50 retail units to reach a departure gate that could technically be reached in a third of the distance. This isn't inefficiency. It's the same principle as a casino floor layout, just wearing a transit uniform. Staffing ratios matter more than people realize. A well-run terminal maintains roughly one customer-facing staff member per 4,000 daily passengers, split between rail operations, retail concierge, and cleaning crews rotating on 20-minute cycles through high-traffic corridors. Because a visibly clean, well-lit space measurably increases retail conversion, something internal transit authority studies have put at a 12 to 15% uplift versus poorly maintained comparables. Then there's the surveillance and data layer almost nobody thinks about. Modern terminals track anonymized foot traffic heat maps in real time, using the exact same footfall analytics technology as shopping malls, to dynamically reprice advertising slots and retail rents based on which corridors get busiest at which hour. Your 8:15 a.m. eastbound platform corridor might command triple the ad rate of the same space at 11 p.m., and you adjust contracts accordingly. And the loyalty engine, frequent traveler lounges, station-branded membership programs, and partnership deals with hotel chains and airlines exist less for passenger comfort, and more because a lounge member spends, on average, 3 to 4 times more on site than a standard passenger, according to industry retail conversion benchmarking. The clearest example of this, model done right, is Tokyo's major private railway conglomerates, companies like the operators behind Shinjuku and Shibuya stations, which pioneered what's now called the terminal department store model back in the 1930s. The core insight was simple and, at the time, radical. Build the department store directly inside the station, so commuters shop on their way through rather than making a separate trip. That single structural decision turned what could have been a modest transit fee business into retail and real estate empires generating billions in annual revenue, with the railway ticketing operation itself sometimes representing less than 1/3 of total company profit. The origin wasn't glamorous. It was a handful of regional commuter lines competing for the same passengers, and the winning strategy was simply figuring out how to monetize the walk, not the ride. First failure pattern: over-leveraged redevelopment. Operators frequently borrow heavily against future retail, advertising revenue to fund a terminal's renovation, betting on passenger growth projections that assume nothing changes for 20 to 30 years. When a new high-speed rail line reroutes traffic away from an older hub, something that has happened repeatedly as countries modernize their rail networks, stations that borrowed $180 million against projected footfall have seen actual usage drop by 35 to 40%, leaving debt service obligations that outpace real revenue within 5 to 7 years. Second, failure pattern: retail mismatch. A station operator assumes commuter psychology mirrors mall psychology and leases premium space to boutique or luxury retailers expecting browsing behavior. But commuters don't browse, they grab. Stations that filled 25 to 30% of retail frontage with luxury or slow turnover retail have seen those units sit at 40–50% vacancy within 18 months, while a quick service kiosk half the size in the same corridor out-earns the empty boutique it replaced by a factor of 6. Here's the disaster story. In the mid-2000s, a mid-size European regional hub underwent a $290 million redevelopment, expanding retail concourses and adding a rooftop commercial complex, all financed against a projected 22% annual passenger growth rate tied to a planned new rail corridor. The corridor got delayed by government funding disputes for 11 years. Passenger numbers stayed flat instead of growing. Retail tenants who'd signed leases based on projected foot traffic began defaulting one by one, starting with the anchor department store, which walked away from a 15-year lease just 3 years in, taking roughly 40% of total concourse revenue with it overnight. Within 4 years, the station's operating company was restructuring $210 million in debt. The rooftop complex sat 2/3 empty, and the local transit authority had to step in with an emergency subsidy just to keep basic rail operations running through a building that, on paper, was supposed to be a self-funding profit center. So here's the resolution to the paradox. The trains losing money and the building making a fortune aren't a contradiction. They're the same machine working exactly as designed. The railway's entire job is to guarantee a captive, recurring, government-backed audience. It doesn't need to turn a profit itself because its profit shows up one layer removed in rent, advertising, and per-passenger fees. The math only works at true scale, over decades, with volume nobody can fake. Which is exactly why so many smaller or newly renovated stations, betting on volume that hasn't arrived yet, collapse trying to imitate a model that only works once the crowd is already guaranteed. Let's run the real numbers on 2 scenarios. Scenario 1. The regional commuter hub. Entry cost via a 30-year concession lease. $9.4 million. Annual revenue across retail rent, advertising, and per-passenger access fees. $2.6 million. Operating costs, staffing, security compliance, maintenance, $155 million. Net annual profit, roughly $1.05 million. Payback period, just under 9 years. Scenario 2, the flagship urban terminal. Entry cost via a 35-year public-private redevelopment concession, $650 million. Annual revenue across retail, advertising, parking, and rail access fees, $118 million. Operating costs, including historic preservation compliance and full security mandates, $71 million. Net annual profit, $47 million. Payback period, roughly 13.8 years after which you're sitting on one of the most durable cash flow machines in commercial real estate. So next time you're standing on a platform, annoyed your train is 4 minutes late, remember, that delay isn't a failure of the system. It's the entire business model working on you, one overpriced sandwich at a time. Which tier would you buy into? The sleepy regional stop or the mega terminal you'd never actually own outright? Drop your pick below and subscribe for the next one.